Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Bankruptcy Nerd Alert. And it is May 6th, and we have numbers for April. My name is Jen Lee. I am superhero for lawyers. I'm a bankruptcy nerd. Rebel Esquire is my alter ego. And so let's walk through some of these numbers. So let me share up my lovely Bankruptcy Nerd Alert. Here we go. So talking about yeah, yeah. Talking about April 2026, which month just ended, we talked about Q1 numbers, going through and looking at what April looked like. And if you remember, and I will always point this out to people who are thinking about adding bankruptcy or doing bankruptcy, that we definitely have cycles when it comes to bankruptcy filings. Usually January or February 1st to April 15th, when people get their tax refunds or they get their tax refunds offset, is when they reach out to bankruptcy attorneys. January 1st or January 2nd is the busiest day of the year for phone calls. And so getting into April, we're looking to see what numbers are doing. And I do compare them year over year, not month to month, because year over year is probably a better trend of where things are going. So let's look at a couple of things first. So, as I mentioned, my name is Jen Lee. I own Lawyer Success Network, and I offer full workshops to add bankruptcy to your firm or start a bankruptcy practice. Self-paced. I also do live versions of it occasionally that everyone is invited to attend that has bought the workshop. Support staff training. Do a lot of support staff training these days on various softwares, ways to make your firm run smoother so that your staff are able to help clients and get through things. Bankruptcy Toolbox is a online community with all kinds of fun things, totally nerdy bankruptcy things like content, FAQs for your website, forms and templates, daily alerts for bankruptcy or financial news that you can use for marketing, cases, all kinds of fun things are in there. And then Launchpad is a free community for lawyers who are looking at outside the box thinking when it comes to law firms. So all of those are available on lawyersuccessnetwork.com. So what do the numbers actually say? Commercial Chapter 11s. This is when I flip to the screen, I usually find out that I made a typo somewhere. That's usually where it happens. So commercial Chapter 11s, meaning Chapter 11s that were filed by companies, not individuals. There was a 42% increase from April 2025 to April 2026. And I think like if you're watching the news these days, there's some big ones that came in, but there are a lot of smaller ones as well. And you'll see the subchapter 5, which is the part of Chapter 11 that's designed for smaller businesses. It has a debt limit cap on it, and it's designed to be more streamlined, but still Chapter 11. And that was a 46% increase, which equates to what I'm seeing with my bankruptcy firms when it comes to volume and the types of calls coming in. So increased 42% for commercial Chapter 11s. Subchapter 5 was a 46% increase. And subchapter 5 is business. So it's not individual Chapter 11s, although it could be an individual filing, but the debt or they're operating a business. So individual Chapter 7s, a little bit not as big of an increase as last month, but April 2025 to April 2026, 14% increase. There are some really interesting numbers out there that show for nerds like me, as the trends were going up through 2019, and then there was this huge cliff in 2020 with COVID, we are now seeing numbers get back up to where 2019 was. And I have said this before on my trainings. The first quarter of 2020, before everything shut down, was my busiest month or my busiest quarter, highest revenue ever. And so we were already seeing some cracks. And now we're getting back up to where things were in 2019. Economy had been good for a while before that. So 14% increase for individual Chapter 7s. Chapter 13, and keep in mind that those are only individuals can file Chapter 13. And you have to make a payment plan. So you have to have some kind of income coming in order to make that payment plan work. So 11% increase there from April last year to April of this year, which is fairly standard, pretty expected. The only thing I will usually say about Chapter 13s is it does require you to have income or your client to have income. And so when we see unemployment go up, sometimes Chapter 13 start dropping a little bit because there isn't income to support those plans. Although there are creative ways to have income coming into a household. But that is sometimes one of the drop-offs we see in Chapter 13 when unemployment goes up. Total individual filings, April 2025 to April 2026 was 13% increase. So that's usually a combination of 7s and 13s for the most part in there. So it's usually right in between. Keep in mind that most of the time, Chapter 7 is about 75% of individual filings, and Chapter 13 is usually about 25%. Although some districts are widely skewed from that, that is the standard. Usually you're going to see about 75% of cases as Chapter 7. And it may sometimes depend on the homestead exemption in the state. If there is a lack of homestead exemption, then more people file for Chapter 13 to try to keep their house in Chapter 7. So just one of those things to keep an eye on, especially in your own district and your own exemptions, so you kind of are able to gauge your numbers better. I don't usually talk about Chapter 12. Chapter 12 is family farmers and fishermen. And they're not, some states have more than others. It's really easy to show skewed numbers here because when there aren't very many, a few more make it a bigger percentage than if there were a bunch of them out there. And again, you can make statistics say anything you want. But I did see this cited. And so ABI and Epic had their announcement today with the filings. And this was mentioned in there as well. And I'm seeing this in the news. So April 2025 to April 2026, Chapter 12's 130% increase in filings. Now, again, when there's just a few out there, then it's harder to say it's a trend. But I would say the news these days, we're seeing more and more. I did look at a couple districts that routinely have Chapter 12s filed. And while there may have been several of them filed, I noticed that they were all related to each other. So the 130% increase looks like a big number, and it is, but it's also, again, you have to keep in mind what the underlying numbers are showing. And if you're a bankruptcy attorney, I hope you like numbers, because that's a lot of what we do is numbers. The other stat or things that have been kind of floating around for Q1 out there is a 26% surge in foreclosure filings in Q1. Epic mentioned that as well in their press release today. And that also equates with what we're seeing in the news with foreclosure increases, the filing of foreclosure, and then what you'll see then usually is Chapter 13 picking up because people are trying to save their houses from foreclosure. And Chapter 13 allows debtors to reorganize their arrears. And so when we see foreclosures going up, we often see Chapter 13s increasing to try to combat that, keeping in mind that in order to keep that asset, their home, the debtor still has to make their payment. And so being able to talk through with their clients what these numbers actually mean and what their budgets look like is really important, because sometimes we see Chapter 13s proposed that are completely not feasible because there isn't enough income to pay back the arrears and the ongoing mortgage payment. And those are the hard discussions that you need to have with clients, talking about whether they can afford to keep this house or what they should do at that point. So it's just something to keep in mind when we look at foreclosures increasing, Chapter 12, all different things that I don't usually talk about in a Bankruptcy Nerd alert. So Bankruptcy Toolbox, really, really yellow. If you see me up on the screen, it's really, really yellow. Bankruptcytoolbox.com is where I have all kinds of nerdy things for bankruptcy attorneys to help your practice and give you some resources. If there are forms or templates that you want, I'm happy to curate them for you. Go to bankruptcytoolbox.com and check it out. And then finally, bankruptcy from start to finish. It is my favorite thing to teach in the whole world. I am a true bankruptcy nerd at heart, and you get full recorded access, you get bankruptcy nerd mentoring, and you get to add a practice area that is in demand, counter-cyclical, and really helps people out as well. So if you have questions about numbers, any of the Bankruptcy Nerd alerts, there is one for every month. Sometimes there's one in between, in the middle of the month, if some news comes out. but check out the Bankruptcy Nerd Alert playlist on Rebel Esquire on the YouTube channel. But ask questions, look at numbers, have all kinds of fun. Thank you for following along with my bankruptcy nerdiness.